And the same thing happened with Chernobyl. They blew off this bomb, this nuclear reactor, and then it started sort of spreading throughout Eastern and then Western Europe. One person after another got sick. So that looked like it was contagious, but as far as I know, no rational human being thinks that was a virus. The same thing happened with scurvy. One sailor after another got sick, their teeth fell out, they went into heart failure, a lot of people died. They went to a port, then the next crew of shipmen got the same thing. For 100 years, they thought it was a virus. Then somebody ate a lime or a lemon, the whole thing went away. And the point is, there are huge consequences to being wrong about this whole viral theory or contagious theory. And until somebody proves it to me in the way that any rational scientist would prove it, which is to isolate the virus in the way that I've described over and over again and show that that makes an animal or a human sick, I simply don't buy it. So I'm going to skip the vaccine questions because we went over that last time. Here's a question. Does this new perspective affect my opinion of homeoprophylaxis? So a lot of people ask me, so do I believe that, for instance, giving people measles vaccines has lessened the incidence of measles? That's a good question because it needs to be fleshed out a little bit. Because to a certain extent, even though I vehemently disagree that measles vaccines have lessened the complication or the death rate from measles, that there's no evidence for. But in my take on the situation, it has lessened the number of children in particular who go through the process of what we're calling measles. So why would that be? So first of all, we have to understand what measles or any childhood illness or in fact any so-called infectious disease is. And I know I've used this same example hundreds or thousands of times, but it's you get a splinter in your finger and you don't take it out, and then you get pus, and this pus is the therapy for the splinter and gets the splinter out. So in that situation, the splinter is the disease and the pus is the therapy, period. You can then say, graph that same line of thinking into, so somebody smokes or breathes in sort of toxic debris, which unfortunately is the case with all of us. And then your body does the only reaction it can to get rid of that debris that you've now breathed in your lung. And I want to emphasize, this isn't a way of dealing with it. This is the only way, which is you get fever to liquefy your tissue water, you make mucus, and you cough, and you flush out the debris from your lungs. That process, which unfortunately we call bronchitis or pneumonia, which unfortunately we call the illness, is actually the body's not only a way it cleanses its tissue, it's the only way. Now, unfortunately, because medicine, doctors, etc., don't understand that, they think that is the disease. It's literally the same thing with chickenpox or measles. So measles and chickenpox are part of the maturation process. It's sort of like a snake shedding its skin. In order to grow into a fully present human being, and you could put this, we have a soul and a spirit, and it has to interact with the body, and it gets an inherited blueprint of the body, and it has to make it its own. So it uses fever and it remolds the body just like you would remold clay to make it an instrument for your humanity. And that process of remolding and casting out that which you don't need is what we call childhood disease, period. And one of the reasons we know that is if you stop a child or children from going through this maturation process, what you see is children who essentially don't fit properly in their body.
Wow.
Now, they manifest that in any number of ways. Some of them have eczema, so it's chronic. Some of them have asthma, so it becomes chronic. Some of them have what we call ADD, which is basically pure, I don't fit in my body, so I'm sort of trying to rearrange myself to figure out how to fit. We also know, without any doubt, that children who don't go through this maturation process have any number of chronic diseases increased throughout their whole life. For instance, they have more brain cancer, they have glioblastoma, they have overall more arthritis, they have overall more heart disease, they have overall more of every chronic disease that you can possibly imagine. So in other words, this measles process is not a disease, it's a maturation process. Now, given that, it's perfectly imaginable to me that you could take some characteristic of this measles process, like you could take some of the secretions of the exudate from the lesions, and then you could mix that with some very deadly, harmful poisons. I mean, every poison is harmful, that's the definition. And you could suppress the ability or thwart the ability of that child to go through that process. That is what we're doing with the vaccine. We are thwarting the child from going through that process, which is what they need in order to be fully conscious, fully actualized, fully healthy human beings.
They're kind of
so yes, you can stop it. And as we all know, if you take a group in a population of children and you go about foolishly stopping them from going through these maturation processes, you end up with numbers like, before they did that, 10% of the children had a chronic disease. After you do that, the numbers are something like 54% of the children will now have a chronic disease. ADD, asthma, eczema, all these things that come because the children simply do not fit in their body because they were thwarted, prevented from going through what is a normal maturation process.
Amazing. They want to trick the body into thinking it already went through that process.
The questions that are really long are hard for me to answer. So here's an interesting question. Do I no longer believe in the immune system? And what about products like Immunity Matrix? How do they work, or do they work? So I just want to say, like any hopefully normal human being, I hope I'm still normal. I'll let you guys be the judge of that. Anyways, let's just assume for now that I'm a normal human being. As I go along, I learn more things and discard what I used to know and move on. I think that's just how it's supposed to be. And as I've said over and over again, in every book, including The Contagion Myth, every book I've ever written, every lecture I ever gave, I have made mistakes. Every single one of my mistakes, every single one, was because I believed the dominant narrative more than I should have.
He said the word believe.
Most of them, I had this inkling at the time, like, I don't think this is really accurate, but I just didn't want to take it on at the time. Yeah. And there are still some of those even now, but hopefully as I learn more and study more and think more and understand more, I can take on more and more. So that the question, do I anymore believe in an immune system? The answer is no. Because what do we need an immune system for if there's no viruses and bacteria to become immune to? What do we need an immune system for? And in fact, in the coming days, I'm going to dissect just some of the components of this so-called immune system and to show just how crazy the whole concept is. So